President and First Lady, they are in quarantine at the White House. There's a rally scheduled in Florida today that's been canceled. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows says the president has mild symptoms and that he's in good spirits. Our complete coverage starts with Chief White House correspondent John Roberts. Hi, John.
Dana, good afternoon to you. We're finding out a little bit more direction as to what's going to be happening with the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign manager, Bill Stepien, just a short time ago, issuing the following lengthy statement, quote, all previously announced campaign events involving the president's participation are in the process of being moved to virtual events or are being temporarily postponed. In addition, previously announced events involving members of the First Family are also being temporarily postponed. All other campaign events will be considered on a case-by-case basis, and we will make any relevant announcements in the days ahead. Vice President Mike Pence, who has tested negative for COVID-19, plans on resuming his scheduled campaign events. Any further information about the president will come from the White House. It's possible that we could hear from the president at some point today. Kayleigh McEnany, the press secretary, saying a short time ago that the president wants to get out and speak to the American people in some form, though we don't know of any immediate plans to do that. So how did all of this begin? It appeared to start on Wednesday when Hope Hicks, who's one of the president's chief advisors, was on a trip to Minnesota with the president. She fell ill, had to be isolated aboard Air Force One on the return trip back to Washington. She tested positive on Thursday. The White House then began contact tracing as the president was preparing to go to Bedminster. Kayleigh McEnany picks it up from there.
Just before Marine One yesterday, immediately there was contact tracing that was put into place and all of the necessary procedures. Contact tracing takes time, but rest assured we will always do what is in the best interest of the American people and those around. And I have confidence in the White House medical unit to make the right decisions as they did with Hope and with others.
Now, even though they knew that Hope Hicks, who had been in proximity to the president, had tested positive for coronavirus and in fact had symptoms, the White House operations deemed that it was safe for the president to go on that trip to Bedminster. He was said to be in good spirits during that trip. No signs of fatigue, no signs of slowing down. The House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, weighing in on all of this earlier today. Listen here.
We all receive that news with great sadness. I always pray for the president and his family that they're safe. I continue to do so more intensified. And I know that he'll have the best of care. And that's what we want for everyone in our country. Maybe now that people who see the president of the United States with all the protection that he has and the First Lady still having this exposure, it might be, as you say, a learning experience. But more than learning, it has to be something that is acted upon.
It's unclear at this point how long the president and the First Lady will have to isolate themselves. Typically, it could be around 10 days if you don't have severe symptoms. Then you have 3 negative tests and you can get back in the saddle again. It does sort of leave up in the air what might happen with the next presidential debate, Dana. That is scheduled for October the 15th, 2 weeks from today. It is possible that the president could be out of isolation by then. We'll just have to see.
All right. Lots to cover. Thank you, John. Let's bring in Dr. Mark Siegel. He's author of the upcoming book, COVID, The Politics of Fear and the Power of Science. Well, it's a good thing to write in this book right now. That's a good timing on your part. This news and these developments, a very stark reminder that coronavirus is real. It is a virus that is not vanquished yet. What are your initial thoughts today?
I like what different things, and there's a great opportunity here for the President of the United States to be a leader in terms of what the virus means right now in October. If you're over 70 years of age, if you're overweight, we've pounded that drum for so many months, Dana, that if you're over 70 years of age and you're overweight, you're at higher risk. Now, of course, we've also talked about other pre-existing conditions the president doesn't have, like diabetes, like high blood pressure and heart disease, known heart disease and lung disease and kidney. Risk of weight and the risk of age. So if the president actually gets through this with mild symptoms, which is what he's reporting right now, Kayleigh McEnany just talked about.
All right. Dr. Siegel, I apologize. I could only pick up every couple of words there, so we've had some problems with his audio. I'm sure that what he was saying was very smart. We'll try to bring him back. But let's bring in our panel right now, Ari Fleischer and Donna Brazile. Good to have you there. So we couldn't listen to all of that. Ari, let me first ask you, so Kayleigh McEnany said that White House operations deemed that it was safe for the president to go to Bedminster, though they knew about the positive coronavirus test.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my arms around that. What does that mean? Who would stop the president from traveling? And I would presume it's the medical staff. The medical staff would then say to the chief of staff and to the Secret Service, we deem this unwise, we don't think he should, or they would give the green light. According to Kayleigh, they gave the green light. That's how that type of guidance would typically come out of the White House and go to the practical people who make the decisions.
Donna Brazile, we were in Cleveland together. The Cleveland Clinic, their statements was a little strange. I'm not exactly sure how the protocols were for the actual campaigns. I know that you were there. We were tested. Your thoughts today? Obviously, I know that you are a faithful person and you pray for the president and the first lady. But you're concerned about going forward? I'm sure you did.
No question. Look, I was chair of the Democratic Party when Secretary Clinton, as you know, had a bout of pneumonia on 9/11, and I realized that day just how fragile everything is. And of course, you have to adapt to these circumstances. My thoughts are with the president, the first lady, the family, and others, and clearly the chair of the Republican Party. COVID is highly transmissible. As someone who's had to deal with it personally from my family point of view, I still have relatives who are, quote unquote, going through it, as they say. They've gotten over it, no more symptoms, but they still have some indication that this virus attacked them. Look, going forward, let's go back to the basics. Quarantine if you are tested positive. Get a lot of rest, Mr. President. I know you don't like to hear from me, but get a lot of rest, sir. Drink a lot of fluids, because that's very important. I wish I could bring you my grandmother's soup. But the other thing is that we got to wear these masks, the face coverings. We got to wash our hands. We got to do the social distancing, and we have to be respectful.
So there are consequences now. We are in the middle of a campaign. I want you to listen to Mitch McConnell. He was on earlier talking about the debate schedule.
I think it should go forward. Hopefully the president feels up to it, and, they can work this out remotely. We're doing an awful lot of things remotely these days because of the coronavirus. Hopefully they'll be able to do this as well.
Ari, we've all shown that we can be nimble. We have the technology. I mean, there's a lot of things that are different this year in this campaign. Your thoughts on the debates and how we do this?
Well, first we got to listen to science and doctors. If the doctors say that, and the timing is the debates, second debate's October 15th, I believe. The president got diagnosed October 2nd, October 1st. I mean, that is right on the cusp of the 14-day period. Can it go forward? We don't know yet. And I think the doctors are the ones who have to say the president is beyond the period where he could get other people ill or not. And if they deem not, then clearly it does not go forward. But then he should do it virtually. As you point out, Dana, all of us in our lives have gotten used to doing things we never thought we would do before, and we've done them virtually. And they've turned out fine.
Yeah, and then you can maybe even get like your dog to bark or something.
Proceed. Ideas. What's that?
I said you could even get your dog to bark or something, as Donna Brazile found early on in the pandemic when we were trying to do Zoom. Donna, let me just get a last thought from you about the Democrats' perspective about going forward with debates. I know that Biden said that he does want to do debates. Now we've had this development. Any thoughts there or anything you're hearing from the campaign?
No, but I know that the campaign in the closing weeks, we're going to do more events and more personal engagement, what I call the COVID conscious canvassing. Hey, I think we all need to go back to phase one. We want to see these candidates back on the trail. We want to see these candidates healthy. But at the same time, look, Ari and I, we make a good couple on TV. I think Joe Biden and Donald Trump can do this virtually. So let's be safe. Do it virtually.
All right.
Besides,
we'll see how it goes.
There's a mute button.
Ari Fleischer, Donna Brazile, be safe, you both, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Let's bring back Dr. Mark Siegel. I believe that his audio is fixed. Doctor, we have a lot more at our fingertips now in terms of therapeutics. We know how better to treat coronavirus. Did that go through your mind when you heard about this diagnosis?
Yes, especially Dana, because he is over 70 years old, I thought about that. And the first thing we do much better now is we identify this. We have early diagnosis. You notice that the testing was done, and we know about this before he has symptoms or even when he has very mild symptoms. And we can test everybody around him to try to isolate people who are sick. And then in terms of therapeutics, we're still working on what I think is going to be the most exciting breakthrough, which is monoclonal antibodies. Those are synthetic antibodies that we can give. They're like what's in the plasma that we've been giving, but these are made in the lab, and they're looking very, very positive this last week, actually, for people that are just starting to get ill. And then we're using remdesivir, an antiviral drug, for people that are getting more ill, and steroids for people that are in the hospital. And we know how to manage ventilators like we did before. Perhaps the most important thing is we know that this virus causes an increased risk of blood clotting, and we know how to prevent that blood clotting or to treat it. Really important things we have going for us that are keeping people alive, which is why in over 70-year-old group, the survival rate is over 94% right now.
All important points. Dr. Siegel, I'm glad we were able to get you back on the show. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Dana. I think you can be a role model for surviving this. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Okay, much more on the president and first lady this hour. Up next, we'll check in with the Biden campaign. And what could this mean for the showdown over the Supreme Court? And now on his way to Michigan after the Democratic nominee and his wife tested negative for COVID-19. And that's also where we find Peter Ducey. He's live in Grand Rapids. Hey, Peter.
Dana, good afternoon. The former VP's COVID test this morning delayed his entire day on the campaign trail by about 3.5 hours, but he is on his way. A press pool traveling with him in Delaware saw him getting out of an SUV and onto the campaign plane. They were shouting questions, but he did not come over to talk. So we have only seen Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee. We have not heard from him yet today. We do have some updated guidance, though, about the way that everything has been changing so quickly and the way that it affects his schedule here in Michigan. 2 events dropped off his schedule, a virtual fundraiser and a mobilization event no longer listed. That mobilization event was notable because just yesterday, the Biden campaign reversed course after months of deriding the Trump campaign for canvassing and knocking on doors as dangerous. And the Biden team said they're going to start mobilizing volunteers to start canvassing and knocking on doors this weekend. Dr. Jill Biden is campaigning separately from Joe, heading to Manchester, New Hampshire, and Kamala Harris is on her own, blasting off for Las Vegas before the campaign announced if Biden's events were still on or not. She and Biden are tested regularly anyway, so are staffers who spend a lot of time around them. The Democratic nominee says he gets 4 briefings about COVID per week from public health experts who advise him what is safe and what is not. So he has been advised by his inner circle that this is safe. And we have new information now from the University of Utah that Wednesday's VP debate, Kamala Harris versus Mike Pence, the host school, the University of Utah, is still anticipating that event will go off, which is consistent with what we have heard from some campaign officials. But everything is changing very quickly. Yeah. That is the way things are right now, though.
That's interesting. That's a good update. Thank you, Peter. So stocks are falling this morning after news of the president and the first lady tested positive for coronavirus. Now, that was early this morning, but the markets, they've since bounced back. And Jackie DeAngelis has the latest on all that. Hey, Jackie.
Hey, good afternoon to you, Dana. Yeah, we've come a long way in this session with the market staging this turnaround after the futures and the market reacted harshly to this news that the president and the first lady tested positive for COVID-19. A few things could be happening here. Now, the turn came right when Joe Biden tweeted that he didn't have the virus, but it was also when Nancy Pelosi made some comments on the dynamics of stimulus talks changing, but also as the day has gone on, and we know so far that the president only has mild symptoms. So the market's digesting this. At its session low, the Dow is down 1.5%. But let's step back for a second. What are investors going to watch for over the next 2 weeks? It's, does this upend President Trump's campaigning ability and participation of the October 15th debate? And of course, how those might impact the election. Now, markets have made it very clear in the past how they feel about the policy policies of Vice President Biden, those that he wants to introduce if he were to win in November, whether it's taxes, energy, or regulation. Investors still weighing if this is something that could cost the president the election and in turn reverse his market-driven policies. This all unfolded this morning as we waited for the unemployment report. It's the last one before the election. 661,000 jobs were added. The unemployment rate falling to 7.9% from 8.4%. The drop in the rate was better than expected, so investors are taking everything they know right now, and markets are bumping around the flat line, but telling you that the negativity we saw earlier isn't there, Dana.
Good update. Thank you, Jackie. President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, she tested positive for coronavirus, negative for coronavirus this morning. The White House says her last contact with the president was on Saturday. But one of the senators with whom she met this week now says that he has tested positive. Sorry to mix that up. Congressional correspondent Chad Pergram is live on Capitol Hill. Hey, Chad.
Hey there. Well, Democrats are very concerned about forging ahead with this confirmation process, especially the news we heard about the president today. Republicans are saying, no, this isn't going to delay anything. Here's a statement I'm going to read you from Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, and the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, Dianne Feinstein. They say, quote, it's premature for the committee to commit to a schedule when they don't know the potential exposure from the president's infection. Now, Republican Utah Senator Mike Lee announced he is positive. He met with Barrett on Tuesday. Barrett is being tested daily, and she tested negative. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham says concern about infections won't sideline the Barrett hearings. He told President Trump that today by phone.
And so we're on track. We're going to start October the 12th, and we're going to work hard to get this wonderful, conservative, young lady, talented beyond belief, Amy Barrett, on the Supreme Court.
Now, it's unclear what this hearing would look like with these health concerns here at the U.S. Capitol. Will they have the senators beam in remotely like they've done with other hearings? We were also being told that the Office of the Attending Physician is now testing members and staff who may have been exposed. That's a key issue here. And again, we talked about hiccups. This is the type of hiccup that could delay the Senate from considering this nomination before the election. Dana?
All right, but it sounds like Lindsey Graham says it's on track, so we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll keep in touch with you, Chad. Thank you. So what could the president's positive COVID test mean for our national security? Congressman Michael Waltz is up next. With the president and first lady testing positive for the coronavirus, there are concerns it could put our national security at risk. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin, she's live at the Pentagon to catch us up. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Dana. Well, in the wake of the president's positive COVID test, the U.S. military has not changed its posture, and the president remains the commander-in-chief, despite being quarantined in the White House residence. The military aide carrying the nuclear football remains nearby. A Pentagon spokesman wrote, quote, there's been no change to DoD alert levels. The U.S. military stands ready to defend our country and interests. There's no change to the readiness or capability of our armed forces. Our national command and control structure is in no way affected by this announcement. With regard to reports about E-6B aircraft being placed on alert status, the U.S. Strategic Command says this was a pre-planned mission for the communications aircraft that serves as a backup command and control for the country's nuclear arsenal. According to the Pentagon statement, Secretary Esper, Chairman Milley last met with the president on Sunday at the White House. 6 of the U.S. military's top leaders were present at the White House event on Sunday. Secretary Esper tested negative for COVID on Monday and Wednesday of this week. Today, he will be tested again as planned for continuation of his travel overseas. Chairman Milley was tested this morning and was negative, we're told. Both Secretary of State Pompeo and Defense Secretary Esper are traveling overseas with their wives in Europe and North Africa and have no plans to return early to the United States. Defense Secretary Esper was touring the tourist market in Morocco this morning as news developed about the president's condition. From the Pentagon's perspective, it is business as usual, Dana.
You know what? Business as usual is good to hear. Thank you, Jennifer. Let's bring in decorated Green Beret and Florida Congressman Michael Waltz. He was at a rally in Florida with the president last week. You're not supposed to be at that one, and there had been one scheduled for tonight. Right. Congressman, I do want to read to you one tweet from a member of your Florida delegation, Marco Rubio, who's on the Senate Intel Committee. He said, any adversary who views news of a POTUS testing positive as an opportunity to test the United States would be making a grave mistake. Maybe have you expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. Well, we know the president is a fighter. He has a lot of energy, and thoughts and prayers to him and Melania in pulling through this in the coming days. But to your point, and Senator Rubio, so many people are focused on the effect on politics.
Yeah.
I'm focused on the country and his role as the leader of the free world. And I would hope to see soon a reassuring message from the president that reassures the country, our markets, our allies, but importantly, to the senator's point, sends a very clear message to our adversaries, rogue states like Iran, North Korea, China, Russia, that the National Command and Authority is absolutely intact. Our nuclear forces, which he leads, are always on alert to defend this nation. Dana, it's always worth remembering we have more people overseas, more men and women in uniform overseas than Canada, the UK, and Australia combined. And his most important role is as the commander-in-chief, and we need to be very clear to our allies and our adversaries that that role is not altered one bit right now.
That was interesting and a good point. Maybe ask you to expand on this as well. The idea that you think that that we need to see the president today, or we need to hear from the president today. What would be, in your mind, ideal? Would you like to see a video message, or is a written statement enough?
Well, I think it would be great for the country, our allies, and our adversaries to see the president. Even, there's some reportings that he has mild symptoms, but every time I've been around him, he has fought through everything that has been thrown at him and is just full of energy, and that he is in full command and control of our nation's armed forces. And I just want to say very quickly, Dana, I was at the rally with him last week. Everyone that around him has been tested. He is tested every day. He doesn't like germs just by nature and naturally keeps his distance. And on these new, the way they're doing these rallies now by the airports, the plane pulls up, he's off, gives his speech, and he's back on. So this notion that they weren't taking precautions, I think, is ridiculous. And for those kind of cheering on the fact that this has happened is sad. He's our president. His success is our success and the country's success. Mike, and that's how we need to approach it. Yeah.
They have protocols and can all be as safe as we can possibly be, but still, this did happen. So, we're all going to just get through this and hope that they get recovered very quickly. Thank you, Congressman.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dana. Appreciate it.
Martha McCallum, she is up next. And also follow us on Instagram at The Daily Briefing. Our Insta story brings you the biggest headlines that we're tracking. So make sure you check the top banner and stay up to date. Well, it's the bottom of the hour, so time for some top headlines. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump testing positive for COVID-19. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows says the president is experiencing some mild symptoms, but that he's in good spirits. Vice President Mike Pence and Second Lady Karen Pence testing negative. Pence's press secretary says the VP remains in good health and wishes the Trumps well. And Joe Biden, along with his wife Jill, also testing negative today. The former vice president heading to Michigan. And those are your headlines. President Trump's positive COVID-19 test already affecting the campaign, with the election now only 32 days away. Let's bring in Martha McCallum, anchor of the story. And Martha, I was just thinking, it feels like a month ago that we were in Cleveland for the debate, and it was only 2 days ago. Let's get your big picture thoughts as how this is all going to play out.
Dana, this has been an extraordinary and awful year in so many ways. You look at what the country has gone through, where the president has been over the course of the last year with the impeachment hearings, then the onset of COVID, then the lockdown and the economic havoc that was wreaked by that lockdown. And, through it all, the president seemed impenetrable to this disease. When you think about the fact that his son had it at one point, his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, Robert O'Brien, several cases that we've seen in the White House, and yet the president managed to dodge them. But that all ended last night when we got this stunning news that he and the First Lady Melania Trump both tested positive. And again, we want to send our wishes to them. We hope that he will have a very mild case of this and that he'll be back in the game very shortly. And he said that we heard from Mark Meadows earlier today saying that the president's in good spirits. I think that if possible, it would be really helpful for the American people to hear from him tonight. There are very few parallels for this situation that we're in the middle of today. And, you having been at the center of White House messaging, I'm kind of curious what you think about what they should do at this point, and when the president should try, if possible, to speak to the American people.
It's interesting, because one, I never dealt with something like this, but I do wonder about, they have tools at their disposal that we didn't really have back in the Bush administration until the very end. And for example, Twitter, like the president makes this announcement via tweet in the middle of the night. He talks directly to a lot of people that way, then it gets on the news. But there is something reassuring about seeing your commander in chief. And as Congressman Michael Waltz just pointed out, it is also a signal to adversaries to let them know that, okay, don't even think about trying anything here. Like, we've got this. I've got mild symptoms, and maybe who knows how he's actually feeling. If he's not feeling that great and he doesn't want to be on video, it sort of depends. I think that hearing from him obviously would be good, but I also think that there could be downfalls to that as well. What do you think about Joe Biden traveling to Michigan today? They both tested negative this morning, so he's going to continue on the campaign trail. And maybe that's just what we all have to do, is do our best to keep our social distancing, our mask wearing, our hand washing, and try to do our best in campaigning?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is what the whole nation has to do. I think the tables have turned for the moment. You've got Joe Biden heading to Michigan, and you've got the president back at the White House trying to deal with this and get through this. I think, Dana, the next 48 hours are going to be so important to the eventual outcome of this campaign. I mean, the president has a lot of options in terms of how he messages this. If he can send a compassionate message that says, I have a better understanding of what this is like now, having dealt with it personally. I've always, done all I could to try to be as proactive for the nation as possible. Whatever the message is that they decide to come out with. Also, the other possibility is that there are treatments that he may be given that he could become sort of, a personal test case for, that have been approved and that have been used. So I think that the way that this goes over the next 48 hours, and right now it's a huge question mark. We don't know how sick he is or, how mild those symptoms are. We certainly hope that he gets over this very quickly. The whole nation does. But these are really important days to come. And I think that when we do get to the final outcome of this election, we're going to look back at these days and look at this as a pivot point one way or the other, Dana. As Kayleigh McEnany said in the last hour on Outnumbered Overtime with Harris Faulkner, that it is too soon for them to think ahead to the debates. But I mean, it's kind of funny thing that it's actually only 14 days away. It's not that far. But I mean, I understand what they're saying because they're dealing with things minute by minute. Do you have an opinion on what the Commission on Presidential Debates should do? I think, like everyone else right now, they're in a holding pattern. They're dealing with the next debate, which they say at this point they see going forward. Yep. The timing is fortunate that the next debate is the vice presidential debate, and that Mike Pence and Kamala Harris both say that they want to go forward. Both have tested negative. I think it's really important to the nation to continue the process as thoroughly as we possibly can, as everybody sort of weighs their options right now. And I just think that the commission really can't make a decision until we get a few more days into this and figure out whether or not the way they were going to do it will work, or whether they're going to have to do some kind of virtual version of this next debate in Miami, which was a town hall with about 15 or 20 people in the room. It is a real exercise in taking it one day at a time, which is hard to do when you're in the middle of a campaign. Everyone's living in the moment. Exactly. All right. Martha McCallum, thank you so much. We'll see you on the story tonight. Dana, good to see you. We'll see you then. Okay. Thank you. Up next, what the next few weeks might look like in the race for the White House. Our panel weighs in. President Trump's coronavirus diagnosis raising big questions about what the final stretch is going to look like before Election Day. Let's bring in the panel, Matt Gorman and Chris Hahn. And Chris, I know you're usually used to having a match slap. Unfortunately, we don't have him today, but I think Matt Gorman is a worthy adversary and a polite one, I will add, before we get started. So politics does not stop at the positive coronavirus test edge. Here is Nancy Pelosi earlier today.
This is tragic. It's very sad. But it also is something that going into crowds, unmasked and all the rest was sort of a brazen invitation for something like this to happen.
That was fairly measured, but Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman, said he still won't wear a mask. He only cares about himself and his life, not those around him or the people he took an oath to protect. Too many lives lost because of his deadly lies. Right, Matt Gorman, let me get some reaction from you.
Well, I'm not surprised from Rashida Tlaib. Certainly uncalled for. I've seen far more well wishes from both parties than I have things like that. But look, I think for this home stretch, we don't know. That's the short answer to this. So much depends on what Trump, how he feels in the next 5 or 10 days. I think, is a need for him to appear before the American people, but also the world, and show that he's in charge and relatively okay. He needs to do that, I think, within the next 24 hours.
And Larry Sabato, Chris, down at the University of Virginia, he tweeted earlier today that everyone's saying that this is a major shakeup for the campaign, and he doesn't see it that way. He thinks everyone pretty much stays the same, that the president's voters will be with him and Biden's voters will be with him, and it will be a pretty close election. How do you see it?
Well, first, I wish the president and the first lady well, as I wish the 205,000 American families who've lost lives during COVID and the 7 million plus who've been infected. But I agree with Larry Sabato. I don't know that this is going to move this race that much. We've had a wild year. And if you go back to even a year ago, Biden's lead was 7 points on average in the national polls, and that's where it is today. So will this move it? I don't know. But the president has been doing everything he can the last 2 months to get people to talk about anything but COVID-19. And it is going to be impossible for them to change the subject off COVID-19 now that the president and many people around him have unfortunately been diagnosed with it.
And he won't be on the campaign trail, though today, Matt, there were some positive economic numbers, everything continuing to move in the right direction. Can the campaign, now that it's had to cancel a lot of events and taking other things day by day, or on a case-by-case basis, can they drive that message in another way, alternatively?
It's going to be tough, right? They all wanted to focus on the economic side of COVID. I think with his diagnosis, it'll certainly overshadow that. Put it more on the healthcare side where Democrats want to talk about it. I'm very interested to see what happens with the debates. I think they'll happen whether it's probably virtually. Down ballot races in the Senate and the House have done it to some success, though I think there is a necessary part of it. There needs to be some sort of neutral observer or someone to verify that both candidates aren't using teleprompters or notes or things like that, where Republicans have accused Biden of using teleprompters in his interviews.
I know. I was thinking earlier today, Chris, we've all been on Zoom calls when we're trying to figure it out, and you don't know why your video isn't showing, or that the most used phrase is, Dana, you're on mute. I'm like, oh, sorry. I try to figure it out. Your thoughts about the debates?
Well, I don't know. I've had a studio in my basement for 5 years. It works pretty well. I think that they could put a studio in Joe Biden's basement that works equally as well as mine does, I would think. I mean, I think there are going to be debates if the president is recovered enough to do that. And that is a big if, given his age and some of the other conditions around him. And I am praying for him, as I know all Americans are as well. So, but, I would like to see a debate that's better than the debate we had on Tuesday, where both President Trump and Joe Biden can lay out their vision for America and not just have a slugfest like we saw the other night, which was worse than any of the debates we've done here, for sure.
I don't know. I mean, that is saying something, Chris, and I think we'll have to take that up again another time. We'll have a vote by the producers. All right, Matt Gorman, Chris Hahn, thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Coming up, what this could all mean to voters. Frank Luntz weighs in.